Best advice I ever got in security. Go.
When I first became a CISO, my CIO described the security team as a black box, meaning no one knew what was going on. And so the keys to success were going to be transparency, communication, and collaboration.
It's time to begin the CISO Series podcast.
Welcome to the CISO Series podcast. My name is David Spark. I'm the producer of the CISO Series, and joining me is my co-host. You know him, you love him. It's Mike Johnson. He is the CISO over at Rivian. Mike, say hello to the audience.
Hello, audience. Glad to be with you again.
He loves being with you.
I do.
He is true to that.
Yes, I truly mean it.
Mike, you wouldn't lie about loving being with the audience, would you?
I would not. I'm not crossing my fingers. This is my honest face.
No, he never does that back talk of when the mic's off. It goes, oh, I never want to talk to that audience again. That's not Mike Johnson.
Nope, not me. Might be David, but
What?
It's not me. What?
Oh,
What?
that? You know, we're available at CISOseries.com. Are you familiar with that website, Mike?
I've been there once or twice.
You should go there often. In fact, I recommend everyone go there at least 6 times a day. It will actually improve your health. We currently have that being checked out by the ADA, the American Dental Association,
I think it'll check out.
and the FDA. They're looking at both of these right now.
Seems likely.
Our sponsor for today's episode is Vanta. Automate compliance, manage risk, and prove trust continuously. And Vanta has continuously been a wonderful sponsor, so we love having them on board. And more about them later in the show. All right, Mike, we are just a few weeks into 2025. And actually, from the day that we're recording this, tomorrow I'm going to be on a show that you've been on and I've been on, and is the Daily Tech News Show.
I love that show.
And I'm specifically on an episode that is going to be about predictions.
The predictions show.
Now, here's something that they are doing that I think is awesome. And I never thought of it. And why doesn't everyone do this with prediction shows is I'm doing a prediction, but I'm required to come back next year
Yes.
to see if my prediction actually panned out, which
It makes for a very good show.
it makes for a very good show. And I love the fact they do it. And I'm like, why don't all of these prediction shows do this?
I think it actually holds you a little bit more accountable for making your predictions in the first place.
Yes.
If you know you're going to have to come back and answer what happened, maybe you put a little bit more thought into that
Now,
prediction.
I threw out a bunch of predictions, and one prediction, which, by the way, always comes true, and I make it every year, is when people say, and I've said this before on the show, and I'll ask you if you agree or you have a different one. People say, what is the prediction for cybersecurity? And I say, you remember what we just had? Expect more of it. And I'm always right.
I think that is one of the safest predictions ever in cybersecurity is that thing that we did plus a little bit more.
Yeah, plus a little bit, maybe a lot more.
Maybe a lot more. Like it's a bad year if it's a lot more. We'll take a little bit more and call that a good year.
You'll be safe hedging your bets ahead there.
Yes.
But do you have a different prediction for 2025?
I think that's actually a very safe prediction as a little bit of Groundhog Day of like, well, we're doing this again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there you go. All right, let's bring on our guest. I'm so thrilled that our guest is here because we've had him on before, and I realized, oh my God, it's been a long time since we've had him on, and he's great. He is the CISO for the University of Texas System and the author of Project Zero Trust, none other than George Finney. George, thank you so much for joining us.
Howdy, y'all. Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
Surprising research just in.
Quote, consumers who believe strongly that corporations are responsible for maintaining data privacy are more inclined to purchase from marketers who are perceived as doing a good job of maintaining data privacy. This was one of the conclusions from a study by researchers at Marist College. Privacy is a competitive differentiator, but that flies directly in the face of the goal of the marketing team, which is to gather and track as much data about customers and potential customers as possible. It's always easier to make the argument to collect more data from your customers. So I'm going to start with you, Mike. So how, as a CISO, can we better make the case for emphasizing privacy and data minimization as good for business and customers? Because that seems like two opposing forces to me. Do you agree or disagree?
I want to start with a misperception.
Okay.
I do not think that marketers are trying to collect personal information. They're not trying to track people. That's not what they care about.
But they are trying to collect a lot of data. I mean, go to the Dreamforce conference. You were at Salesforce. You know this.
The reason why they do that is what they really care about is demographics and market segments. Like they don't care what me as an individual do. They care what people like me do. They care about what CISOs do.
Well, they do want to sell to you individually and tailor as best they can to you.
I think that is then when you're moving into the sales cycle, right?
Sure.
So again,
Okay.
marketers versus sales,
Yes.
two different things.
I agree.
And so I think with that in mind, we should be having those conversations with our marketing teams. We should be sitting down with them, explaining to them the risks of overcollection, especially as there's more and more regulation about that collection, understand what they're trying to do, and maybe help explain to them, well, hey, you can still accomplish what you're after if you do it in a different way. I mean, ultimately, this is what's best for the business all around. They want what's best for the business. We should want what's best for the business. So I really encourage to have that conversation with your marketing team. And I think you'll be able to land in a good place.
And also, you make a good point. The marketing team can also tell you what data works the best and for how long it works the best.
Exactly. And I think, again, that is an area where they are experts. We might go in and say, oh, gosh, you can't keep this data for 12 months. And they're like, I only want it for a week. I don't even want it that long. And then you have that moment, that aha moment.
Right, because they can tell you after a week, where you walked on Monday really is only valuable for the past week. And after that, I don't need it.
And then again, it's usually all aggregated together anyway. And so the individual data doesn't matter.
All right, let's go to George on this one. What is your tactic here to emphasize privacy as being just as important to business and the customers?
I love this study because it means that we as consumers expect that culture of privacy and security has to permeate the whole organization, right?
Right. Good point.
You can't just have a great security program. You can't just have a company that cares about privacy on the back end without that being integrated into your marketing program. So I think if you're in marketing, you should listen and collaborate with your CISO and your chief privacy officer. And, just like Mike was saying, focusing on data minimization, limiting data retention periods, and making sure, that's in alignment with your company's values. That is what privacy and security are all about.
Unexpected outcomes or failures.
We have limited visibility into what's going on. The systems they operate on are so old, they're probably dripping oil. And when they fail, the result impacts human lives. Operational technology, or OT, has historically been difficult to secure because of a mismatch between modern security tools trying to communicate with antiquated physical systems. Traditional security tools can't handle the unique protocols used throughout OT. Legacy systems are using dated operating systems that no longer offer support, said Abhishek Kumar Singh of eTech International Corporation. We've heard this story before, but unfortunately, complaining doesn't improve the issue. George, I'll start with you. Where are you actually seeing success managing what seems to be a perennial mismatch between aging physical devices and the tools we're using to secure them?
Well, I'd like to introduce you to this thing. It's called Zero Trust.
This is a man who believes in this. He wrote the book on it.
I know a lot of folks that are using Zero Trust in operational technology environments, right? And it's super successful in those areas.
And is it like just completely sidestepping this problem?
When I think of OT, I think of microsegmentation. I mean, I don't know if you would describe that as sidestepping the problem or just focusing on the outcomes that you need to be successful. But we had a case several years ago. Just segmentation alone isn't zero trust, right? That's one tactic within your overall zero trust strategy. We had an issue where we had an unrouted network that someone fat fingered a config, and we discovered later that network was accessible everywhere. So, including in your zero trust program, right, there's a 5-step design methodology that John Kindervag created. Including in that visibility and monitoring and testing is also a huge component of that, right? So I think you've got to have a comprehensive approach when it comes to your zero trust strategy. So, but I do think it applies whether we're talking about a regular, internet commodity connection and operational technology, or even AI.
Mike, I'm tossing this to you. Is the answer a new zero trust model that kind of doesn't deal with these classic issues of the mismatch between the antiquated technology and the new tools?
One thing I'll start with is OT isn't as bad as everyone thinks it is all of the time. There are very modern OT environments. George is talking about microsegmentation, which is a very viable approach. There are, of course, old OT environments as well. And what that means is there's no one-size-fits-all approach. There are some times that you can add agents if you need to. There are some times that you can't go anywhere near it because the network protocol is so fragile that even looking at it funny might cause the thing to fall over. So it really does come back to what is appropriate for your particular environment. I do think the microsegmentation approach is a really sound one, because that then does allow you to deal with any number of protocols. The classic approach to OT is, well, you just build a big wall around it and then everything's fine. And that might have worked way back in the day, but you've got two problems, I guess three with George's example of it should be unroutable and then all of a sudden it isn't. You've got the problem that these systems, once you're in that environment, they can't protect themselves. And so if it's one big environment, crunchy on the outside generally means chewy on the inside. Another problem that you have is in modern OT, data needs to come in and out of those environments. They can't actually be the islands that they used to be. And quite often that data needs to flow in real time. It can't be the batch uploads that we used to do. And that does mean you need to come up with a segmentation approach that works, that is manageable, that is scalable, that is agile, because factories change over time. That's my experience with OT is in a factory environment, that there are changes. There's new systems coming in. There's new lines being built. And that does mean you need to have some agility as well with all this.
Before we go any further, I do want to talk about our absolutely spectacular sponsor, and that would be Vanta. So let me ask you a question. Do you know the status of your compliance controls right now? I mean, like right now, this very moment. We know that real-time visibility is critical for security. But when it comes to our GRC programs, the traditional thing is we just rely on point-in-time checks, and geez, that could be once a year. But get this, more than 8,000 companies like Atlassian and Quora have continuous visibility into their controls with Vanta. Here's the gist. Vanta brings automation to evidence collection across 30 frameworks like SOC 2 and ISO 27001. They also centralize key workflows like policies, access reviews, and reporting, and helps you get security questionnaires done 5 times faster with AI. Now that's a new way to GRC. You can learn more if you go to the website over at Vanta. And actually, go to our little custom page there. That's vanta.com, vanta.com/CISO. Vanta.com/CISO. Go check it out and see how you can be more efficient with your GRC.
It's time to play What's Worse?
All right, it is time to play What's Worse. I know you know how to play this, George, because you've played it before. Just reminding you, Mike will answer first, and then you will then answer. And Mike, this comes from a person who I'm saying is anonymous. I know who it is, but to you and George and to the rest of the audience, this person is anonymous. All right?
Okay.
Here's your situation. You've fully implemented RBAC, role-based access control mechanisms, across all core platforms in your organization. You just discovered, though, however, that 2 months ago, a massive breach resulted in the theft of valid login credentials for 50 random users across the organization. Okay? Now, the other option is you've fully implemented MFA, multi-factor authentication, across all your core platforms in your organization. However, you just discovered that 2 months ago, a massive but honest misconfiguration granted 50 random users admin privileges across all your systems. So what has happened is you had a massive breach resulted in 50 valid logins of random users, or the MFA resulted in 50 random users having admin privileges. What's worse?
So we've got here is an authentication versus authorization challenge, right? So in the first case, your authorization is in good place, but your authentication has challenges. And I'm going to assume that this is single factor. Otherwise,
In the first one, yes, because then it wouldn't make any sense. Yeah.
otherwise it'd be very easy. The second one, what you've got is your authentication is strong, but your authorization has issues. Granted, you essentially gave some number of people access to everything. And that's how I'm reading it. And what I would say, again, as usual, both suck. In the first case, you have this potential of outsiders getting access, that they can get into the environment. Maybe they have limited access, but you don't know because you don't know which accounts that they got access to. So there could be some roles associated with some of those 50 people that have deep access just because that's what their role is.
It's possible. Here's the thing. It's possible one of the 50 has admin access. It's also possible none of them do.
Yeah, it's possible that all of them.
But it was clearly a theft.
Yes. And in the second case, what you have is only internal people have access.
Right. There's no visible theft, but people who shouldn't have admin privileges, a lot of them now have it.
Yep.
Which makes things very scary.
Oh, both of these are scary.
I know. But I'm just saying the other one where there's no theft, at least there's no theft in the other one, but it is a very, very scary situation.
What I like is you try and guide me down a path, David.
I'm not guiding. I'm just saying, because if I see you go in one direction, I'm trying to push you in the other.
I know. You always try and pull me back in the other direction. And so I try to make it very clear what direction I'm not going. No, so the way that I think about this is that external access, that is the worst, where you have that potential that somebody outside of your organization, you don't know who, is going to have access to some amount of data.
You always go more with the known.
I think that's probably what we should be doing is in our careers.
Right, but the thing is, it's known hack 50 random, where unknown, who knows, but 50 people randomly have admin. Yikes, am I now really exposed, but maybe not? They're both maybe not. These both could be a big nothing, too.
They could be, and in which case they're not bad.
Exactly.
And this whole game doesn't really go anywhere. But no, comparing these two, that potential and likelihood of external access, that one feels like the worst between the two for me.
Okay. I am throwing this. You heard our endless debate here, George. Where do you land? Do you think the first one with the RBAC situation with it was breached, but 50 random users, we don't know what access they have, or the MFA situation where that's in place, but misconfiguration gave 50 random users admin access, which makes you very, very vulnerable. Hold on, I'm going to also push here. Mr. Zero Trust here that we have on isn't going to like that second one.
I don't like either of them, and the reality is, I mean, it's like straight off the headlines. I mean, both of these options are a reality at all organizations, like all the time. But And I know you hate it when we agree with Mike.
I don't hate it. I just like to create controversy.
No, I mean, again, I think you can do something about cleaning up an internal admin, right? That is something that people are going through in their zero trust journeys because you give away too many admin rights, and you shouldn't have that many. I mean, but also, yeah, we're fighting the same credential stuffing attacks every day. So I'm going to go with the external access. That really is something that I would prioritize in my zero.
You mean the fact that you've already had the breach in the 50
Yeah, exactly. If I'm doing zero trust, I want to focus on the highest priority risks, and that definitely is top of mind.
All right, so we have agreement here. As much as I tried to push one of you the other way,
you tried, and I appreciate that you always give it that solid effort.
I do give solid effort. I want our audience to argue why you're both wrong.
Great, let's hear it.
I tell you, CISOs get no respect.
Quote, backups are worthless. Restores are priceless, said Leon Adato on his blog, quoting his friend Tom LaRock of Blackline. Organizations don't want cybersecurity. They want what it enables, resilience and loss prevention. He also makes the case that cybersecurity isn't the only way to get those two outcomes, pointing to things like built-in redundancy to cyber liability insurance. This also gets compounded by the complexity of showing cybersecurity ROI to the rest of the business. It makes it hard to speak the language of the business when you can't show what people are getting with your budget. So, Mike, do you agree with this? Where do we need to have a more restore rather than backup discussion?
It would get really old having to restore every day.
Well, I don't think we're arguing that for that.
No, we're not. But again, it's a provocative statement intentionally. And the reason why I say that is ultimately security is about risk management. It's just like disaster recovery, availability, resilience. Building a system that is all the way up, 100% uptime is extremely expensive. So businesses are making decisions along the way to say, you know what? 5 nines is good enough. 4 nines is good enough. 2 nines is good enough. All of those are risk management. Just like making the discussions around what are we doing for our cybersecurity controls. And so where I really think we have the problem in talking with the business is there are people within our industry who are absolutists. This idea that security must be perfect or it's crap. And that's where we have the challenge of actually having the nuanced discussion around what we should be doing. So I think it really is start with, don't be a blocker. We always talk about that on the show, but have these conversations about trade-offs, just like your company's lawyers are having, just like finance people are having, just like any other G&A function is having. And that's how you talk with the business. All of these teams have that similar struggle. And if the business is used to having those discussions with their lawyers, with their finance team, they're going to really be open to having the conversation with the security team if you're approaching it with that mindset.
All right. Good answer. All right. Now, I just want to go back to the, backups are worthless, restores are priceless. We just recorded an episode about just the history of backups it's sad how they never sort of work out the way you hope them to work out. So I think that's where we're leaning into right now. How does a discussion, though, become more about restores and not backups, if that's what should happen, George?
I think, like Mike said, there needs to be a nuanced conversation. And I think when people think about IT and backups, right, they just assume, backup's going to work. It's great. They don't realize backups get corrupted. They don't think about, hey, we got ransomware and we're backed up to the cloud, but we only have a 64K connection to download and we're trying to restore 1,000 computers and it's going to take a month. So I think it's really about that education component that IT isn't just always going to work and that there is still nuance to that. But the difference is what we're talking about in security. It's a misnomer when I see return on investment. When the business thinks about risk, they think about risk versus reward, right? You can't make money without taking risks. With cyber, we're not talking about risk. We're talking about danger, right? With ransomware, we're talking about an existential threat to your organization that you could be down for months potentially. And I think having that conversation outside of ROI, look, there are some things we have to do as table stakes, is really important to emphasize, because we're breaking out of that. We're having this nuanced conversation, but also we're recognizing we have to stay in business.
It's time to measure the risk.
When we think about the third-party services our organization depends on, and then all the vendors and services those third parties depend on, it can seem like proverbial turtles all the way down. But Philip Addison of the Hershey Company wondered, how far down the stack of turtles do you need to go when thinking about triggering your own incident response plan? Increasingly, common third-party breaches certainly qualify, but what about fourth-party breaches? Is there any amount of due diligence that can give you visibility that far down and also make you feel okay? So how do you keep tabs on fourth parties, if you can at all? And I'll start with you, George, on this. And how do you know if a random incident that just happened, that you read about in the news, could actually affect you?
We subscribe to some of those third-party cybersecurity scoring companies, and they have implemented some limited ability to kind of see into your third party's fourth party risk. But again, is it something that every organization can chase? I don't think so. It comes back down to systemic risk. And going back to the earlier conversation, there is a nuanced conversation that you have to have with your business partners to, I think, provide that those insights back to them to help enable them to make better decisions, and talk about, there was the Change Healthcare breach that happened. It was a single point of failure, really, for most of the industry, and nobody recognized that systemic risk that, hey, what's it going to take for us to fail over? And we're still seeing the impact almost a year later. So I think we have to do better with our partners and bring them into the conversation, as well as help educating our business partners about how we see those partners and who they're relying on. So, software bill of materials, all of those things are going to, I think, help us continue to improve, but we've got a long way to go.
All right, Mike, I throw this to you. What's your take on this, in that this seems like such an endless problem? So do you ever foresee a point where you can say, all right, I got my arms around this?
So I want to start with contrasting it with the previous topic. We were discussing how we're enabling the business and adding value. This one is about things outside of our control. Fourth party risk, there's nothing I can really do about that. What I need to do is control what I can. I go to my vendors, my partners, and understand if they have a third-party risk management program. And if they don't get any of my sensitive data. And if they do, I kind of have to trust that they're operating it well. At least for my team, I can't spare the resources to roll incident response whenever there's some breach out there that I have no idea if any of my vendors are involved in that. That's very difficult for me to do something with, but also all the time that I would spend on it. And so for me, I want to make sure I've got good contacts with my suppliers. I want to make sure they know who to reach out to if they have a breach at one of their suppliers, so that they know, A, we care, and B, if something does go wrong with one of their suppliers that impacts us, it's entirely likely they have a breach. Doesn't even matter to us. But if it is something that impacts us, how to get in contact with us and how to work with us on scoping that to understand how it really impacts us or our customers.
I want to jump in here and just say the reason that we've been sending out those victim notifications is because our third parties haven't been doing that. For whatever reason, they're inundated, they're overwhelmed, they don't know who is impacted. And so we've been proactive about saying, hey, we're impacted. We don't have a complete list yet, but we just wanted to pass this information along to our customers, our students. I think being proactive means you've got to have that relationship with your customers. It's not your third or fourth or fifth parties that are doing that. That's how you build trust with your community.
Mike, you mentioned something that has come up in a recent show is having essentially a chain of communications is really critical. It's not who to blame, but who you can talk to who knows more than you do, essentially.
Yeah.
And that can actually know the path, has their communications channel from there to go from there.
There is an infinite number of things that can go wrong. And there's an infinite number of things that will go wrong. So you can't build everything in advance with foreknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So if you know who to talk to, and if they know who to talk to, then you can work through issues as they come up. So yes, that chain of communication is critical. And, as George mentioned, that trust for communication is also really important in this, that if you are a vendor, or generally all of us are vendors of something, that your customers know that you're going to reach out to them when something goes wrong, that they can trust that you're going to do that. It's a chain of communication at that point.
And correct me if I'm wrong, isn't this truly the point of all tabletop exercises, figuring out what the chain of command is or chain of communications?
Yes. I mean, for a true tabletop exercise, you're going to find a lot of problems that are probably in your communications, not really in your technical controls.
Well, that brings us to the very end of this episode. So our closing advice, talk to your third-party vendors. Talk to your staff. Just good old-fashioned have a conversation. I want to thank our guest, George Finney, who I'll let you have the very last word on this. But first, I want to mention our sponsor, and that would be Vanta. Automate compliance, manage risk, improve trust continuously. Remember, go to their website, vanta.com, vanta.com/CISO. It's important you throw the /CISO so they know you came from us. Go to vanta.com/CISO. You can probably have a better GRC solution than you have right now. Check them out. All right, Mike, any last words?
Well, I do want to call back. George opened us with the advice of the security team was a black box. Communication and transparency is important.
We have come full circle.
We've come full circle. George set it all up for us in the first place. So, George, thank you for opening on that.
And making us look really good.
Yeah, well, always appreciate that.
Yes.
But thank you, George, for coming on. I really appreciate your approach to transparency and communication. And one of the things that you said that I really want folks to remember is the risk versus reward conversation, and that businesses make money by taking risks. And if we're going in and just saying, hey, you can't take any risks, I'm not going to make any money. So I do think folks need to remember that that's a trade-off. So thank you specifically for that.
We hammer on that as much, and that often many cybersecurity professionals think they're the only ones dealing with risk. I'm like, no, everybody is. They're all doing this kind of thing. All right. I do want to mention, and I want you to bring up the details, the sequel to Project Zero Trust. That's George Finney's book. If you have not already received it, read it, dog-eared it many times, posted about it endlessly, then really what the heck is wrong with you? But there's a chance to redeem yourself. There is a sequel. As I understand, it is not Electric Boogaloo.
It's a shame.
Which is a giant disappointment, George. But it is going to be Project Zero Trust 2, correct? Am I right on the title?
Exactly. Yep. So we, and again, thank you all. I'm so honored that you're willing to, the first couple of times worked out so well, you wanted to have me back.
We love having you.
So Project Zero Trust is essentially a story about a fictional company that implements Zero Trust. It's a case study, but there are characters in it. And that's one of the things that really resonated with people is that they can see themselves, whatever their role is in the organization.
Are these characters amalgamations of people you've worked with?
Perhaps, or maybe just aspects of my own personality.
Oh, so you have multiple personalities yourself. They can make multiple characters.
He has aspects.
I'm maybe in therapy, but
my sister, who's a fiction writer, I will read her books and I go, oh, that's my Aunt Ethel. Oh, that's my dad. Oh, that's my sister. There you go.
So there were some things that we didn't get to cover in the first Zero Trust book, and AI obviously was one big thing. Mm-hmm. So that is really the focus. The company comes back. They're dealing with AI. AI isn't just one thing; it's a lot of different things. And how do you secure it? The answer, it's in the name, Zero Trust. So I don't know if officially the publisher's going to let us call it that, but in my head, I've been calling it Project Zero Trust Volume 2, Rise of the Machines.
Nice.
I don't see any problem with that.
Yeah, exactly. So it should hit bookstores in May of 2025.
We recommend, back me up on this, George and Mike, we recommend our audience camp out at their local Barnes & Noble right now, yes?
Go ahead and get out there. Start now. The lines are going to be huge.
Yeah, just no different than when the fourth Star Wars movie came out. Now, the difference is not everybody's going to be disappointed like they were with that one. People will be thoroughly enjoying.
There is an amazing shout out to Star Wars in the book. No spoilers, but that's the other thing I get to do with these books, and I don't know why Wiley lets me get away with it, but just the pop culture references, it's nonstop.
I'm assuming you're a fan of the Ready Player One books.
Oh yeah, there is
a lot of pop culture reference in that.
Yeah, I reference Ready Player One.
There you go. So it's meta. There you go. Very good. By the way, I will say we play a game in our game shows called Star Wars Character or Cybersecurity Company. And we put up a name. You have to determine, is it a Star Wars character or a cybersecurity company? Let me tell you, this game ain't easy. And last night we played it with our San Diego meetup group. And we did it as kind of a singled out thing because we had like 9 answers. And the idea was whoever was left standing would be the winner. We had a raffle prize to get on. And so, I said, everyone who believes a Star Wars character, you're on this side. Everybody who thinks it's a cybersecurity company on this side. Everyone got out by the second one. Except one guy.
Nice.
And I don't know if he was even playing. He was just like, when I said you won, he had this look on his face like, what? I won.
Why am I even here? What day is it?
Everyone thought it was a cybersecurity company. It was a Star Wars character.
What was it?
I can't reveal that now.
Okay, fair enough.
Because people are going to play. But I will just tell you. And someone pointed out that there was one company that we said was one of the names was a cybersecurity company, and he pointed out, he goes, oh, it's also a Star Wars character.
I know which one you're talking about, yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We greatly appreciate you listening and contributing to the CISO Series podcast.
That wraps up another episode. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please do. We have lots more shows on our website, CISOseries.com. Please join us on Fridays for our live shows, Super Cyber Friday, our virtual meetup, and Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. This show thrives on your input. Go to the Participate menu on our site for plenty of ways to get involved, including recording a question or a comment for the show. If you're interested in sponsoring the podcast, contact David Spark directly at david@cisoseries.com. Thank you for listening to the CISO Series podcast.